to do, just what you had to do. And so your journey was found. And though you had no clue where the journey would take you, both feet were planted on the ground. One day you finally knew just what you had to do, and so your journey began. And though the road seems long, you know it's never wrong to chase your dreams or follow your own plan. It's the blackest nights that make our day so gray. No sign of hope anywhere. We stumble, fall, stand up, then lose our way. And you know it feels so alone out there. But there is hope, there is love, there's a chance to fly so free. There is heart, always sure, there's a place we crawl to be guided. When the night has not invited day, and you lie awake in your bed, those haunting memories only want to stay, if just to pull you back down to despair. But there is hope, there is love, there's a chance to fly so free. There is heart, always sure, there's a place we crawl to be guided. To be guided and given light to see. Guided by someone who understands me. I'm like a boat that's tossed about the stormiest ocean, lost and alone at sea. Help me mend, guide me in each wave of emotion that's washing over me, washing over me. Now it's late enough, the world is folding off sometimes, and the road's full of branches and storms. Begins to burn through cloudy skies. Don't you hear that voice you recognize as your own? And it's saying, and it knows that there is hope, yeah, there is love, there's a chance to fly so free. There is heart, always sure, there's a place we crawl to be. There's a place we crawl to be. There is a place we all will be guided. I want to be guided. Oh, help me to see. I On October 30th, 2001, I lost my voice to domestic violence. And I was at my college, and it was in between classes, and there was an argument that erupted, which resulted in my boyfriend being arrested and given a restraining order that day. And when that happened, I began my recovery. I was helped by a female security guard that took me upstairs to an empty classroom when she saw me bawling my eyes out because my boyfriend was only trying to blame me for the argument and a lot of other things. And she could see that something else was going on. And as I'm bawling, she reached out, and I saw through blurred eyes, she put her arm out and she led me up the stairs to an empty classroom. And she closed the door and she gave me a box of tissues, and I probably went through the entire box of tissues. But by the end, when I sniffled and I stopped crying, and she said, "Okay, so what really happened?" And those words were magic to me because I was able to tell her about all the times that police had come to our home, and I felt safe in that room, and I felt safe with this stranger. And so I told her about the police coming to the home and my lying when they asked me what had gone wrong, lying that everything was okay, nothing had happened. I didn't want to see my boyfriend get arrested because that would have caused so many other problems. We lived together. I would have been left in our 3-bedroom condo alone. I was still trying to finish up school. But you know, as the police came to our door, I mean, there could have been, just moments earlier, I could have had his hands around my neck, or I could have been tugged down the stairs from my ankle because I was trying to get away from him, and I would bruise my chin on every step down. There were other times when, and I told this security guard all of this because I felt safe. I felt like I could finally tell someone that what I'd been holding in for years. And I told her about the times when we were driving on a side road, we were driving, and I was driving, and there was an argument that started, and he pulled the steering wheel, and we started to go into oncoming traffic. And then when I pulled the steering wheel back to swerve out of the way, we ended up hitting a mailbox. And there were other times when, and this is painful for me to share, but when he had punched me in the groin, and he had, punched me in the groin, and then put his arms around my neck and punched me in the stomach. When we had a conversation that resulted in me saying, well, geez, I think I want to finish school before we have children, or I don't know, maybe I'd want to get my career done before we had children, and he wanted to ensure that I wouldn't. So when I say that I began my counseling, the security guard that night gave me a card to one of the 18 women's centers. There's at least 18 women's centers in the state of Connecticut. And I say women's centers, but I do want to clarify that abuse happens to men too. And women can be just as much victims, women can be just as much perpetrators as men can be. So, but, you know, in the majority of the cases, women are the victims. And so that's why there's women's centers around the state. And, you know, they've only really cropped up in the last 30 years. So this is a movement that's really just still beginning. And there are centers for men to be helped as well. And there are centers for men as batterers to be helped as well. Thank goodness there is help out there. And so when I went to first individual counseling at this women's center by my home, and then group counseling, where I was able to meet with other women that were sharing the stories, not the same exact stories that I had been through, but similar stories. And so we were all coming from the same level of pain. And I was, at the very least, and they were at the very least, able to feel validated, knowing that we weren't going through what we were going through alone. So, and in individual counseling, I learned a lot about the psychology of abuse. And I don't know if it's something that we as a society on whole fully understand yet. Either we don't totally understand the psychology behind abuse, or we just turn our heads, or if it's going on, if we hear about it going on, or it's going on possibly in our own lives, we just pretend like nothing's going on and we're not going to talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, we all know what happens when problems aren't talked about. They often grow, and they grow into worse situations. So through my counselor, I learned abuse, there are several different kinds. Abuse is a series of behaviors where one partner seeks to exert power and control over another. And there's emotional, mental, verbal, physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. And very important, abuse can happen regardless of socioeconomic status, race, religion, or education level. So it can happen as much in the high-class homes as it can in the slums. One example of mental emotional abuse is verbal abuse, like name-calling, constant criticism, intimidation, and requiring permission for everyday things like how to spend money or what to wear. Until I came to counseling, I didn't even know that I'd been abused, and because emotional abuse often precedes physical, imagine my surprise when my counselor revealed to me that I was in a pattern of dating abusive men. Okay, and I'm just going to say too, I don't want anybody to go home tonight or to go into your office tomorrow morning and start pointing fingers or looking within and saying, gee, am I abusive? Or gee, is that person abusive to me? Because that's not my purpose. If anything, I'm talking about a specific kind of abuse. I'm talking about relationship violence, also called intimate partner violence, where one partner abuses the other in an effort to exert power and control over their partner. But if anything, maybe some of the things that I've described in my previous relationship maybe ring true to you, to someone that you know, a friend, a coworker, sister, brother, that have described to you what they're calling a troubled relationship, and really it's something that might go much deeper than just problems in the relationship. And maybe I've inspired you to do some research on the internet about the complicated psychology of abuse that we don't fully, completely understand yet. And maybe we will be able to learn more about it and help that person that's complaining about a relationship that they're in. Steer them in the direction of Women's Center. A lot of them have 24-hour hotlines. They can get help. And I always say you don't have to leave to get help, but you just want to become more aware and understand the psychology behind abuse, as it is very complicated. And another interesting fact in the story is that my ex-boyfriend, was also my duo partner. And for 3 years we sustained a working duo, and we sang in the clubs, and we sang at weddings, and we sang in the bars, and he sang guitar, and he had a wonderful voice, and I sang harmony with him, and I sang some solo, and I thought that those were the best times in my life. But except for the fact that there was abuse. And another thing that I learned in counseling was, and this is a shocking statistic, but on average, a woman will leave and return to an abusive relationship 7 or 8 times before leaving for good. I see heads nodding out there. That's great. Because that's when I told Carol that very statistic, she went around telling other people because she couldn't believe it, and she remembered it. And I left and returned, I can tell you to this day, specifically 5 reasons why I returned to my relationship. And every single one was justified along the way. Every single one. And there were a myriad of reasons. I came back because of the 6-year-old son that came to live with us from previous marriage, where he was acting out with his mother a few states away, and she sent him down to live with us, set him straight. And his son had suffered, instability and another upheaval, and I didn't want him to have to suffer yet another upheaval, so I stayed. And when I wanted to work part-time, quit my full-time job so that I can take more classes at the college and I could finish up sooner, and he seemed extremely supportive of that fact, that reason. And, I stayed because we had this 3-bedroom condo that we were living in together, and we spent all kinds of money and time on painting the walls, and buying new furniture. And I thought, well, gee, why should he have to get to enjoy all that? It's as much mine to enjoy as it is his. And I stayed for health reasons. One of the times that I went to leave for a week or so to stay with a girlfriend so we could separate and I could think about things, there was a call that I received at my place of work where my boyfriend, I learned, had been sent to the hospital, the emergency room, for a heart attack. And then also he had, which turned out to be a lung cancer scare, so I wasn't going to leave him alone for that. And then when the World Trade Towers crumbled to the ground and everybody in the nation seemed to rush back to the ones they love, I thought not even abuse mattered. You know, I could put that aside, and we could put aside our differences as well, and that became the fifth and final time that I returned. Did you just give me the 5-minute signal?
I just gave you the 2-minute signal.
2 minutes, okay. So now I'm going to finish up the story in the fastest way I've ever told it. So through the counseling, I came across a set of workshops called My Avenging Angel Workshops, which is essentially, I like to call it a life coaching workshop for women that have been abused. And they go through counseling their victims to survivors, and then they ask, well, now what? You know, I'm aware of what abuse is, but what do I do with my life? And it was through those workshops that I started singing. And it was because in the workshops, I gradually discovered that was my dream again, to sing. And so I became encouraged, and I called, this is going to be real fast, and I called an audition to sing in a band. And from that band, I got in, and from that band, I went into another band called The Happening. And I mostly got into that band because we have because I was able to sing the tunes of a certain 60s and 70s singer you might have heard of, Bohemian, called Janis Joplin. And then I started the Purple Song Project. I'm really rushing my story, but it's okay, because I think I've made my point. And with the Purple Song Project, I seek to give other survivors hope, healing, and awareness through song. And I have the Writing Songs That Heal workshops, where I go into the women's centers and anywhere else that'll have me, the hospitals maybe, and teach women another tool to help them heal. And thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience, and I really appreciate this opportunity.